Well, the main point is you can't do science without morality. You got to have a moral scientist and obviously a competent scientist as well. In fact, if science is the standard of morality, which scientist gets to decide which is right? In fact, here are two German scientists, Einstein and Joseph Mengele. Now, as far as I know, Einstein was a very moral man. Joseph Mengele wasn't. You know what Mengele did? He was the Nazi doctor that did all sorts of terrible experiments even on children. You got to import a standard outside of science in order to do science, right? I mean, science can discover if something harms, but not why it's wrong to harm. I mean, science can tell you whether if you put somebody in a gas chamber, it's going to kill them, but science can't tell you should you put them in a gas chamber or not. That comes from outside science. So Shermer's point can't stand that somehow we get our morality from science. In fact, which scientist was more moral? You got to have an external standard. You'd say Einstein, quite obviously. You can't get morality from a test tube. Science presupposes and uses morality, which is why Einstein himself said this. He said, "You are right in speaking of the moral foundations of science, but you cannot turn around and speak of the scientific foundations of morality. Every attempt to reduce ethics to scientific formula must fail." You can't put honesty in a test tube. You got to be honest to do an experiment. You got to be honest to do science. You got to be honest to interpret the data rightly. You got to be honest to collect the data and ensure that it's done properly. That you get that from outside of science. And the last thing I mentioned in the debate was this. For Shermer, it's even worse because morality and science are impossible without the free will to choose, the ability to reason, and the fact that we have a mind beyond the brain. Remember, he's a materialist. Remember, he admitted that? None of these things exist if materialism's true. In the debate, Shermer wanted to have it both ways. He wanted to say, oh, I believe in free will. How? I mean, you believe in it, but how can you justify it? Right? I mean, if we're just molecular machines, there is no free will. In fact, atheism cannot explain these things, but theism can. If atheism's true, our minds are just molecular machines. We are just moist robots dancing to our DNA, as Dawkins rightfully put it, which means we don't have free will, which means we don't reason, we merely react, which means, therefore, we shouldn't trust any of our thoughts, including the thought that atheism is true. You shouldn't. So, the bottom line is reason, morality, and science would be impossible if atheistic materialism were true. You see, atheists have destroyed all tools necessary to be scientists or to be people that can discover morality or to be people that have free will. They've destroyed all the tools because they say we're just molecular machines. Now, why do they say we're just molecular machines? Because they don't like the only other alternative, and that is we're not molecular machines. There's a soul, there's a God, there's somebody that sustains all this. So we know that it's true. Atheists are stealing from God to make their case. We know there must be an immaterial reality out there.